Ooh. Um, I apologize for the way I sound. I just hate the way I sound recorded. Maybe I actually do sound like this in real life, and don't tell me because then I would never want to speak again. Or maybe you want to tell me, and then I'll never say another word. Okay, so this is where we left off for the last lecture. Hopefully, you're watching this over the weekend because I told you to in class, and I hope you heard me. Okay, so this is a picture of a little girl who is in mourning. And you know what? I'm not even going to talk about that because I'm not sure. I can't really see the details in this photograph. I can't tell why someone has identified her as in mourning because, in my opinion, and this is a very, like, not a great opinion, I just can't see what it is that people who study this a lot more in depth than I do would be able to point out about her clothing and stuff to show that she's in mourning. So we're going to go with it. All right, so our northern, dang it, there we go. Okay, our northern economy, we have this, so it's said, your textbook talks about how the North is transformed. It's it says that Lincoln is presiding over changes in northern life. Um, the fact that you have a war is always really good for the economy. The mobilization of the amount of, I'm sorry, I just got a text and I don't, okay, I'm not gonna look at that. I'm not gonna be distracted by that. Look at me, acting like a real teacher and stuff. Okay, so like I was saying, a war is always really beneficial to the economy. It ramps up your industry. You need more raw materials, so that's great for your farmers and your, um, what are they called? They cut down trees. Foresters? Sure, I'll go with that. I mean, like, obviously they're a lumberjack, but then I think of the guy on the Bounty paper towel roll. Um, so we have a lot of people benefiting from this kind of need for supplies for your army. You have people who are with a lot of money, like they've got the money to invest in it, and so they're going to take advantage of this. This happens in every single war. That means that if you ever want to get rich, get to a political position where you can start a war and then benefit from supplying that war. We have this rising class of capitalist businessmen. The South is just completely economically devastated, but in the North, the economy is taking off. We have industrial profits going up because there is wartime inflation. We have government contracts to produce supplies, to, mine coal, to smelt iron. I think that's the right verb. Mechanization is increased. Like, there's a big push for mechanization because we need to have boots and shoes, and we don't need to have to hand make those because the people who normally hand make those, we need to send them out to fight. So mechanization is on the uptick. Agricultural production, like I said, it is expanded because even though we have all of these farmers and their sons that join the military, the preser okay, how does the book put it? The book puts it, frontier cultivation pressed westward and with lost labor replaced by machinery and immigrants. Okay, so basically we just spread out farther with our agricultural land, and we have immigrants replacing this population that has gone off to fight. Now, that's future America's problem because what do we do after the war is over? And no one thinks about that. The Northern government commits heavily to rapid economic growth and development. Congress starts kind of looking around and saying, hey, wait a minute, without all these ridiculous Southern Democrats, we can get through some policies that we've been wanting to do for years. So they take advantage of the fact that the South is gone And so most of the South were Democrats, and most of the representatives and whatnot that are still up in Washington are Republicans. They're going to agree with each other, and they're going to want to put through these policies. They put through some policies that kind of, what's it called? Why can't I think of this word? Something about the financial system. They make it better. I don't know. Um, what did I want to say about that? Okay, yeah. So the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act is put through in, I'm thinking 1863. Yes, 1863. It goes into effect the same day that the Emancipation Proclamation is put out, right? Yeah, no, same day it goes into effect. God, I feel like I'm an idiot right now. And I'm the one leading you to your APUSH exam. Ooh. Okay, so to increase this agricultural development, and I guess this is what we're talking about by that westward movement of agriculture. The Homestead Act opens up public land to settlers who want to go into the West. It takes effect on January the 1st. And kind of in like a short overview of what this act did, if you were willing to go and live on the land for, I'm pretty sure it was 5 years, and you made improvements to the land, and you registered, like you registered your parcel, that land was yours. So many people that, ended up living there for the rest of their lives, people who are still there today, they can trace their family back to moving to places like, I don't know, somewhere in Kansas, to this Homestead Act. There's also this Land Grant College Act that helps establish agricultural and mechanical colleges. Mississippi State eventually is our state's agricultural and mechanical college. That's why a friend of my mom's who went to state called it Cow and Plow. She was a huge state fan, so I know it was not in a derogatory fashion, but I just always thought that was very funny. Also, it rhymes, and rhymes are amazing. We also have things happening in our railroad. Yay, railroad. Okay, no, I don't need to go to another slide yet. Congress puts aside money and land for internal improvements, including 100 million acres to the Union Pacific and Central Pacific railroads. The government looks at them and says, we want you to build a railroad from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. They are the first corporate charters issued by the federal government since Andrew Jackson got rid of the Second Bank of the United States. So I guess it's pretty cool if you're into railroads. The Trans-Continental Railroad had always been this kind of like brainchild idea, but everyone thought it was too expensive, too impractical, and they weren't wrong. The Central Pacific only went about 20 miles a year because it was almost impossible to get through some of these mountain ranges. In building these railroads, there were a lot of Chinese immigrant labor contracts that are put into place. These laborers were called coolies by Americans. You had the Chinese that were willing to do work that was too dangerous for even the Irish to do. So, like the dynamiting things, the Irish were like, no, thank you. And speaking as an Irish person, we are not known for our level headedness. But even they were like, no, we're not going to do that whole dynamite thing. Thank you. And the Chinese were like, I guess we'll do it. And again, this is how a lot of Asian immigration happens on the Pacific, and stay there on the West Coast. When it was completed, the Trans-Continental Railroad goes from Omaha, Nebraska to San Francisco. And just because of that, markets are opened, but the big losers here are your Native Americans. Shocker, I know. I'm sorry, but they put these pictures in some of the weirdest spots. I don't understand why. Okay, so the war. This is not so great. Most of our, like I was saying earlier, there is conflict that happens in the far west, but eh, it's it's more, how do I describe this? To me, it seems like it's more conflict between the people there rather than actually sending huge numbers of troops to war there. Now, Jefferson Davis wanted to have Texas and the Southwest. He was like, this is going to be great. We can add to our region as soon as, this whole war thing is over. He wanted to get to California, northern Mexico. It's very similar to the plan that Aaron Burr had when he wanted to make himself emperor. So that's interesting. I had never thought of that before. The Confederates, however, are defeated at a battle of Glorieta Pass in March of 1862. The Union group had some volunteers, and the Confederates end up having to retreat to Texas, like way back. So this isn't a thing. The fact that, they wanted to expand slavery, that was like, no, thank you. We're going to retreat back and we'll figure that out later. At the beginning of the war, Lincoln removes all of the federal troops that are in the West and calls them home so that they can protect Washington, D.C. Again, a strategic move, definitely. But this is going to completely abandon your Native Americans to any white people who want to move into Indian land. Um, the treaties required the army to be there. But, when you're fighting a war, you got to make the tough decisions. Conflict happens between our Native Americans and our white settlers. The Sioux kills hundreds, the Sioux tribe, sorry, the Sioux tribe kills hundreds of white farmers in Minnesota. And eventually, like, the army comes in and, like, does put that down. They were going to hang, like, what's the number? I mean, they were going to hang some, because I looked this up. They were going to hang something upwards of like 300 people, 300 of these Native Americans, and Lincoln ends up commuting their sentences of death for all but 38 of them. So it, 38 is still a lot. It's the largest execution in American history. So good job for that. They're annihilating the people. Colorado soldiers at the Sand Creek Massacre kill around 400 Arapaho and Cheyenne men, women, and children. This is a really, really, really sad. If you ever want to just, be really depressed, go read accounts of the Sand Creek Massacre. It's harrowing. We have the Army launching campaigns against the Kiowas, the Comanches, and the Navajo in the far Southwest. And the Navajo themselves had been victims of the Kiowa and the Comanches before, the Union forces decide to go in and destroy all of their orchards and livestock, and then force them to go on their own long walk, like the Cherokee before them, where 8,000 of them were removed to reservations. And this is a very important event in the history of the Navajo people. Eventually, the Navajo are allowed back onto some of their ancestral lands, but even today, the Navajo live in poverty. It's really sad, although it's really funny to see how much they troll white tourists, and it's great. Just because I support trolling of anyone at any time. Um, Strangely, the Confederacy treats our natives better than the Union does. The Confederacy is like, look, you are able to elect representatives to our Congress. Um, the states do not have jurisdictions over Indian reservations. Like, you have complete self government. That's all on you. And actually, oh my God, who is it? The camp, No, wait, I think I'm wrong. Pretend I didn't just say that part. I don't know how to edit again, so here we are. Some of the Cherokee were slaveholders. At the end of the war, they were forced to give much of their land away. And they also were forced to give some land to their former slaves, even though the white slaveholders not necessarily were. So, I don't know about that. I don't like that, but again, I was not alive, so I don't have any say over that. Okay, so here we are looking at our different territories. The Long Walk of the Navajo goes like that. They do eventually end up going back into the Southwest where they're from. Um, you can read this. I don't have to read this to you. Okay. This is a painting of the 38 dead Sioux. So that's nice. Yay. This is a photo of the Long Walk of the Navajo. As you can see, good times, good times. All right, our new financial system, I kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago. The government, the national government has to raise money to pay for this war. So they raise taxes, they enact the first real income tax. They also borrow a lot of money. They sell bonds. So the way the government is able to kind of like, I don't know if we went over this for the revolution, but basically they kind of go to people and they say, hey, I need some money now. If you give me $100 right now, in 20 years, when I know this war is going to be over and we're going to be on much better financial footing, I will pay you back that $100 with interest. So they decide to start selling these bonds in a way to, make money. They also, oh yeah, and this goes into a lot of debt, my bad. They print more than $400 million worth of paper money called greenbacks. And there had been no paper money before that. You have your coins, but it's just not durable. Like we see that now. Money it tears, it gets washed. It's much more durable now than it has been in the past. But it really wasn't used. We also charter a new bank. So we have our new national banking system, which comes back from the dead after, we know Jackson got rid of it during his administration. Let's see what else I want to talk about. Profitable contracts. This is where a lot of our people that are going to become captains of industry in a few years, like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, they're earning millions by supplying the United States with their products. Andrew Carnegie's is steel, Rockefeller is oil. J.P. Morgan was just a financier. Like all he did really was make money because he had money. They were also able to not have to serve in the military because they're able to buy their way out under the draft law. These kind of actions during the Civil War expands the power of the federal government, and it's never going to go back down to the size that it was. It just starts getting larger and larger. So just like Lincoln kind of expands the responsibilities and role and powers of the presidency, during his administration, the role of the federal government increases, which is kind of sticking it to the Confederates because their whole thing was like small federal government, and now they're like, well, we're just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think we have kind of hinted at something called the cult of domesticity. Basically, women belong in the home. Their job is to look over their family, take care of their children, take care of their husband. They don't really have a place in public life. Well, now, since all of our men are going to war and dying, Who steps in? Every single time. Every single time there's a war, women step in and start pulling up the slack because, ladies, that's really all we do is just when something gets dropped, we pick it up and then we run with it. Maybe we'd be good football players. I don't know. I think we would probably just like do mean things to people. Um, all right, so women take manufacturing jobs. They start nursing. They start being clerks. They start working in the federal government as like little secretary people. While after the war, a lot of them, a lot of these jobs were returned to the men, you still had a lot of women involved in white collar government jobs. They worked as store clerks and nursing. Nursing is now considered something called a pink collar job, and that's like a job traditionally associated with women. Northern women also, well, not just Northern women, but women in general took part in military campaigns with their nursing. Clara Barton actually worked in the patent office in DC, and she ends up help organize supply lines and nursing wounded soldiers. She works alone because it's a big old mess with the organization that's supposed to do this. You also have a lot of women who didn't necessarily work they weren't what's considered, like boots on the ground. They organized fundraisers. They got money and supplies and sent little, packages of comfort to these men who are fighting. It's called, what ends up evolving in this time period is called the United States Sanitary Commission. And it is kind of like our centralized relief agency. After you take the AP exam, I have a really super depressing documentary to show you about death in the Civil War. Although by that point, we may just want to watch movies. I don't know. But this is where our kind of governmental takeover of taking care of soldiers' remains, things like that, happen in your sanitary um, groups. Sorry, I got distracted as usual. Men looked at these things that women are doing to help support the war effort as something that is a natural extension of their inborn capacity for self-sacrifice. So the fact that they're volunteering to work and getting out and actually doing these things brings women out into a public sphere. It gives them, like, it shows them things that they can do. It shows that they are not dependent on any man. um, the suffrage movement kind of wanes at this point in time. I'm sorry, I'm really making myself laugh, and that's sad because I recognize that my jokes are not funny. Um, they, the suffrage movement, like I was saying, I'm sorry, it doesn't happen like during the war. There's no point. They're trying to devote themselves to keeping the union together because if you don't have a union, who cares if you can vote in it? And trying to, support emancipation. But the more and more, work and blood, sweat, and tears that they give to this war effort, it kind of is insulting that these women are able to sacrifice everything and, even their own children, they're able to, send their sons in to die for the Union, but they're not able to vote for the people who send them to die. That's a bit of a short stick. We had some people, some women that come out of I don't even know what to call it. I guess it's like, what is this? What is the textbook called? They call it the Wartime Mobilization movement. They end up joining the post-war movement for women's rights. We have a woman named Mary Livermore. That's a terrible last name. She was the wife of a minister, and she ends up really hating women's legal and political subordination. And so she's like, you know what, I'm getting on board with this women's suffrage thing because this is garbage that women are allowed to care for dying soldiers. They're allowed to raise money for dying soldiers, but they're not even allowed to vote to recall dying soldiers home. Clara Barton becomes an advocate of women's suffrage and president of the American Red Cross. She's also someone who successfully lobbies the government to adopt the first Geneva Convention, which, we all know what the Geneva Convention is. It's basically humane treatment of your casualties in war. Make sure I covered everything. Yeah, okay. Filling cartridges at the U.S. Arsenal of Watertown, Massachusetts. So that's a pretty dangerous job because you're dealing with gunpowder. All right, so even though, we would like to think that the North was united behind this union, you do have people in the North that not really supportive of Lincoln. Republicans in the North labeled those who were against the war copperheads. And this textbook says, after a poisonous snake that strikes without warning. I know your freshman year textbook said something different, so we're just going to know that they're called copperheads, and that's that. There are rising casualties. The North is changing very quickly, and people want to dig in their heels a lot of the time and say, stop it, I don't like it. There are huge populations of southern born people too in some of these more western states that aren't necessarily in favor of this war. Our social tensions get even higher. The union puts in a draft law which allows individuals to provide a substitute or to buy their way out of the army. Workers are resenting the manufacturers and the financiers who are able to do this. They're making money off the war and they don't even have to fight in it. The Democratic Party is very, very critical of Lincoln's policies. You have war Democrats who support military effort but are not in favor of emancipation or the draft. And then you have some that just want peace now, peace forever, peace, blah, 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 blah. In July of 1863, if you watched the movie that I highly recommended before you went to Christmas break called Gangs of New York, with a young Leonardo DiCaprio. Although it's not his best work, or not like his best physical work. His face looks a little wrong. Anyway, there are 4 days of riots in New York City in July of 1863, mostly started by Irish immigrants because they are basically being taken off the boats, given they signed this contract to fight for the Union, and they're sent off with a gun, and they're not even here. They destroy draft offices, the mansions of the wealthy, of the Republicans who are sending them to war, industrial establishments, and they really target the city's Black population. A lot of these individuals fled to New Jersey or hid in Central Park, and it took Union troops actually marching into the city to stop the uprising. Some African Americans were lynched during these riots. Like it's just really scary. I love this because it is my type of just stupid joke. Any holder but a slave holder, and it's a pot holder. I love it. Again, like I said, there were riots where, they lynched African Americans for, they saw them as the reason why their people were going to die. So, all right, I'm going to stop this here because I have to go pick up my children. We are going to pick up with the Confederates in lecture number 4. I wonder how many lectures I'm going to have to move this into. Hopefully not too many. All right.